Welcome to Legislative Assembly, How General Sessions Work Virtually. We are so excited to have you join us for this year's Legislative Assembly. This year, we're going virtual, so things will be different than in the past. If this is your first time attending Legislative Assembly, you're probably full of questions. But even delegates who have attended Legislative Assembly in the past need to understand the many changes due to this year's virtual format. There will be two other videos for this year's Legislative Assembly. One focuses on what first-timers need to know, and the other focuses on caucusing and amendments. The first few slides of both this video and the caucusing and amendments video cover some key information about Legislative Assembly resources, important dates, and voting delegate information. If you watch both videos, please feel free to skip the duplicated information. On the Washington State PTA website, the Legislative Assembly page is found under Events and Programs. There you will find all of the information you need about registration, voting delegates, schedule of events, voting information, and more. If you find you have questions that can't be answered on the website, please email support@wastatepta.org to get your question answered. Information related to caucusing and amendments can be found on the voting information page. There's also a Legislative Assembly newsletter you will receive as soon as you register. If you would like to start receiving the newsletter before you are able to register, you can sign up by updating your Constant Contact profile by clicking on the footer of any of our newsletters that you receive, including Leadership News, and selecting the Legislative Assembly newsletter. Old editions of the newsletter are linked towards the bottom, so please go back and read any issues you may have missed. Here are some important dates for you. This year's event is October 23rd and 24th. Local PTA and council presidents must submit their voting delegates no later than October 10th. If you will be a voting delegate, you must be registered for Legislative Assembly by 11:59 p.m. on October 17th. The deadline to register for non-voting attendees is October 24th. The education session is Saturday morning, October 23rd, immediately followed by the Q&A caucus sessions. General sessions, classes, and panels will occur on both days. Amendments to the proposed resolutions must be pre-submitted no later than 8 a.m. Sunday, October 24th. Voting on the proposed resolutions and any submitted amendments will occur in General Session 3 on Sunday, October 24th. This year, we're using Whova for our platform for Legislative Assembly. Be sure to download Whova in advance and become familiar with its features. Laptops and desktops are recommended for full functionality, but attendees may join the meeting on any computer or smart device with an internet connection. After logging in, attendees will not have their cameras on and will be muted unless called on to speak. Any member of a local PTA may be an attendee by registering by the appropriate registration deadline. This year's attendee registration fee is only $40 for adults and $10 for students, and includes access to all classes and materials, educational opportunities, caucusing, and general sessions. Attendees who are not authorized as voting delegates by their local PTA or council president by the required October 10th deadline may attend but not participate in the general sessions at Legislative Assembly on October 23rd and 24th. Attendees may register through October 24th. The voting delegate registration fee is the same as for attendees, but these members have also been authorized as voting delegates by their local PTA or council president by the required October 10th deadline. Voting delegates may attend and participate in the debate and voting in the general sessions of Legislative Assembly on October 23rd and 24th on behalf of their local PTA or council, and must register no later than October 17th. Please note that although anyone registered may attend the caucus sessions, only registered voting delegates may submit motions to amend standing rules or resolutions, as well as debate, speak, and vote in general sessions. Reminder, voting delegates must be authorized by their president no later than October 10th and must register no later than October 17th. On the Legislative Assembly website, you will find all of the information you need to help you understand how to register and how to become a voting delegate. There are 2 steps to becoming a voting delegate to Legislative Assembly, each with its own deadline. To register, Go to the main Legislative Assembly page and look for the blue Register Now on Whova button. Remember, the registration fee is only $40 for adults and $10 for students, so take advantage of this great deal and send as many voting delegates as your PTA is allocated. The next step is to be authorized as a voting delegate, and that involves your local PTA or council president. You must be authorized as a voting delegate to submit amendments and motions, speak during general sessions, and vote. Go to the voting information page and scroll down until you see delegate information, and then click on the drop-down for voting delegate information. At least one president for each PTA will be sent an email containing a link to a survey form that must be used to identify authorized voting delegates. If you have co-presidents, please coordinate who will complete the survey. The survey form linked to the email will contain spaces for the number of delegates your PTA is allowed according to Washington State PTA uniform bylaws. If a president is a voting delegate, you must include them on the list of delegates on this survey form. Your list of delegates must be completed and submitted to the Washington State PTA office no later than 11:59 p.m. on October 10th. If a president does not turn in the names by this date, the attendees will not be eligible to be a voting delegate. Each voting delegate is allowed to represent only one PTA, so a voting delegate will not be able to vote for both a local PTA and a council. If the Washington State PTA office receives a duplicate name, we will let both the local PTA and the council know. This survey form can be completed before or after the member registers. The on-screen confirmation for this form includes a link to the registration payment form for your convenience. Identifying a member as a delegate does not register the member to attend. A registration payment form must also be completed. Delegates must be a paid member of the PTA, and the PTA must be in good standing. A reminder, submitters need to make sure they are voting delegates to be able to speak and vote for their proposal. Now that you've heard about how to become a voting delegate, it's time to find out more about how to become an informed voting delegate. You have some homework to do. The Legislative Assembly page of the website has several resources to help you become an informed and prepared voting delegate. Go to the voting information page and you will find the following documents for your review. The 2021 Voters Guide will give you the details of all the proposals being debated at Legislative Assembly. You will be able to read each proposed position, a persuasive statement from the submitter, as well as the Washington State PTA Board of Directors recommendation. Proposed changes to any existing positions are shown as a strike-through for deletions and as underlined bold font for additions. Please note that only the parts in the shaded boxes are open for amendment and debate. The 2021 proposed standing rules should be reviewed in advance as well. The How Things Work Guide is a multi-page document that has details about everything related to our virtual event. It covers everything from the education Q&A caucus sessions, how to submit an amendment to a proposed position, speech and debate, voting, and more. Please review this document in advance. Please remember that only voting delegates, including student voting delegates, have the right to make motions, speak and debate, or vote during general sessions. Speech and debate during general sessions will be completely different due to our virtual format. All attendees will have their cameras off and will be muted unless recognized to speak by the chair. Instead of a total debate time clock that runs down while we try to unmute speakers, debate on all debatable motions will be limited to 3 speakers in favor and 3 speakers opposed. The speaker list will be closed after we reach these speaker limits. The speaker list will be shown on screen so that speakers can see when their time to speak is coming up. Once this limit of speakers has been heard on a main motion, debate will be closed and the vote will be taken on the main motion. All speeches are limited to 90 seconds and the speaker time clock will show on screen. Just as if this was a normal in-person legislative assembly, a voting delegate may request to speak on a motion only after it has been introduced. The speakers list for each motion will not be open in advance. After the introduction of a resolution, one delegate may speak in favor, followed by one speaker against for the main motion as a whole. We will then consider all pre-filed amendments for the position, followed by the remaining debate on the main motion as a whole. At the conclusion of the first speech in favor, if no delegate wants to speak in opposition and there are no amendments, the vote on the main motion will be taken without further debate. No voting delegate may speak more than twice on the pending motion, and no one may speak a second time on any motion before someone who wants to speak for the first time on that motion. A voting delegate wishing to speak in favor of the proposal should type "Speak Pro," and those wishing to speak against a proposal should type "Speak Con" in the Zoom chat to be added to the speakers list. Delegates must first be recognized by the chair in order to speak. Delegates will then be unmuted by staff. Delegates should then state their name and local PTA or council name and number before beginning their speech. While primary amendments to resolutions need to be pre-filed, there are other types of motions delegates may wish to make. These include motions to amend the primary amendment, motions to extend debate, motions to refer back to committee, etc. A voting delegate who wishes to make a motion shall send the text of the motion using the Zoom chat feature. After recognition by the chair, the voting delegate making the motion will be unmuted and will say, "I move that," or "I move to," followed by their motion. Before the motion can be discussed, it must be seconded by another voting delegate by typing "second" in the Zoom chat. The purpose of the second is to be sure that someone else wants to consider your idea. If there is no second, the matter is dropped and does not come before the meeting for discussion. Once a motion has been made and seconded, it will be stated by the chair, and then the chair will ask for discussion. The maker of the motion will be the first person recognized to speak. If your motion is not in order at the time, for instance, it isn't relevant or germane, the chair will rule the motion out of order. A voting delegate who has a request for information will type out and send the question using the Zoom Q&A feature. The Points of Order Inquiries monitor will either read it out loud when called on by the chair or address it by responding in the Q&A feature as appropriate. If the question does not relate to the pending motion, the chair will rule the question out of order at the current time. What is a request for information? Basically, it is a question asking for some factual information that relates to the current business. As an example, let's say that the current motion is to spend some money to advertise for a banquet. It may be useful for you to know how much money is currently in the account before deciding how to vote on the motion. A request for information could be, quote, "Would the treasurer please tell us how much money is available in the account?" The chair will take this up and before recognizing the next speaker. The inquiry must be a specific question to ask for factual information. It must not be to make a point in rebuttal or to clarify a point made in debate. Rhetorical questions are debate, not requests for information. The chair will respond to your question or ask someone to answer, and there will be no further discussion. A parliamentary inquiry is similar to a request for information, and it is handled in the same way. The difference is that while a request for information asks for factual information, a parliamentary inquiry asks a procedural question. Basically, it is a question when a voting delegate does not understand something being discussed or what is happening during the meeting. Sometimes the issues get confusing and you don't know which motion is being discussed. You may have a question on the effect of a vote under consideration, or you may not know if it is currently okay to make a particular motion. Don't sit there if your question needs to be clarified before the vote is taken. The chair will take this up before recognizing the next speaker. The inquiry must be a specific question to ask a procedural question. The chair will answer the question or may ask someone else to answer. A voting delegate who has a parliamentary inquiry will type out and send the question using the Zoom Q&A feature. The Points of Order Inquiries monitor will either read it out loud when called on by the chair or address it by responding in the Q&A feature as appropriate. If a voting delegate believes a procedural rule is being violated or ignored, they may raise a point of order. Points of order will be ruled on by the chair, subject to appeal by the delegates. A voting delegate who wishes to raise a point of order will type out and send the point of order using the Zoom Q&A feature. The Points of Order Inquiries monitor will either read it out loud when called on by the chair or address it by responding in the Q&A feature as appropriate. Voting will happen multiple times throughout the general sessions. A reminder that only voting delegates can vote and that they are voting on behalf of their local PTA or council. Voting delegates will vote using Election Buddy. A vote will be treated as a rising vote if the chair announces the vote counts on each side. The polls will remain open at least 30 seconds for each vote. Legislative Assembly is a wonderful opportunity to discover what makes PTA such an effective advocacy organization, the passion of its members. Legislative Assembly is one of those opportunities where you really get as much out of it as you put into it. Attend the Q&A education caucus sessions, as well as the classes and panels to learn more about the work we do as PTA. And then attend the general sessions, where we adopt new positions to help us advocate for every child. Many attendees comment that by going through this process, they come to recognize that PTA is much more than fundraisers. Legislative Assembly is how we truly engage in our mission of being a strong advocate for the well-being and education of every child. Come along, it's a fun ride. Thank you, and we hope you enjoyed this year's Washington State PTA Legislative Assembly.